I gotta know who I am. I gotta know what I'm like. I have never done anything right. I've been going around with my head in a sling for years.
Hey friend, welcome to my channel karinealourde, where we deep dive and break down the most iconic stars in history. If you're not yet subscribed, please be sure to do so and turn your notifications on so you never miss an upload. Now let's get into this video. Today we're talking about the icon James Dean, the original heartthrob. He lived probably one of the most colorful lives in Hollywood. Joe Himes said that Dean was one of the rare stars like Rock Hudson and Montgomery Clift, whom both men and women find sexy. And according to Marjorie Garber, this quality is the undefinable extra something that makes a star. Dean's iconic appeal has been attributed to the public's need for someone to stand up for the disenfranchised young of the era and to the air of androgyny that he projected on screen. It's fitting that his most famous film, Rebel Without a Cause, in which he played troubled teen Jim Stark, is remembered as a cultural icon of adolescent disillusionment and social estrangement because of the role Dean played. His other two iconic roles were the loner Cal Trask in East of Eden. Because of his unconventional approach to life, which many believed included confusion about his sexuality, Dean is often held up as a sensual icon. As voted on by the readers of Gay Times, he is the greatest male gay icon of all time. Dean reportedly responded to a question about his, which way does he swing when it comes to his love life? And he said that he's not gay. That's not me by any stretch of the imagination. No, sir. But I refuse to live with one hand tied behind my back, end quote. Journalist Joe Himes suggests that any gay activity Dean might have been involved in appeared to have been strictly for trade as a means of advancing his own career. James Bella, the son of American Western author James Warner Bella, was a friend of Dean's at UCLA and later stated, Dean was a user. I don't think he was gay, but if he could get something by performing an act once at an agent's office, Dean told me that he had spent the summer as a professional house guest on Fire Island. Mark Rydell also stated, I don't think he was essentially gay. I think that he had very big appetites and I think he exercised them, end quote. He would sleep with anybody to get ahead, says Darwin Porter, author of James Dean, Tomorrow Never Comes. He continues by writing, he had 3 or 4 conquests each week.
But popularity has a downside. Rumor. Books and magazines vie for the hottest revelations and scandal. Jimmy's life is dissected and analyzed, particularly his sexuality.
Then when he died, I began to interview friends, many of them male, and many of them claimed to have had relationships with him. He was bisexual, not homosexual, but as he put it once to me, I'm not going to go through life with one hand behind my back. His sexuality, it's a question of your own sexuality. You're gay, you want to believe that Jimmy was gay. You're straight, you want to be certain that Jimmy was straight. Hey, he was all things to all men.
What was he like with you?
Well, now and then we could go into a restaurant, but all of a sudden just leave the table and go away without an excuse or anything, move over to some old buddy of his and start talking about cars or something like that and be gone for half hour. And it was just no use of getting mad at him for that kind of thing because that just didn't do any good. You just had to understand that was the way he was.
Jimmy was not just a friend. He was a brother. He was part of my life. I had lost everything. He said, get dressed. You're going to go to the Astor Bar on Broadway, and you're going to go to the bar, and you're going to order a drink, and you're going to see what happens. I had been to the Astor Bar, and it was a place where men picked up men, or boys picked up boys. And I thought, I don't know, what do I do? I mean, we had this secret from one another.
He performed with such intimacy that people felt they knew him. And everybody who liked James Dean fantasied a relationship with him.
And though he wasn't the most handsome man, didn't have a great body, had 2 false front teeth, and was often rude, women and men threw themselves at him.
Jimmy didn't have front teeth. They were knocked out when he was young in an accident. Fell from a tree or something.
No, motorbike.
A motorbike. One time they had a drink, an alcoholic drink. And Jimmy took out his teeth and put them in the drink. He was always doing funny little things like that.
But despite all his success, he remained a tormented soul and never escaped his inner demons. Dean's secret lovers included Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, Judy Garland, Marlon Brando, Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, Rock Hudson, and Spencer Tracy, and so much more. He was difficult, selfish, and insecure, according to Darwin Porter, who wrote the book on his life, on James Dean's life. And he made love to some of Hollywood's greatest beauties, he continued. Amazingly, Dean's dreams of marrying Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor never came to be. Dean met Monroe in 1955, and the pair quickly got into a romantic little situation one weekend at a beachfront cottage. It was very loving, very romantic, Monroe told actress Shelley Winters. I've agreed to marry him one day. After several weeks, they recognized that the marriage would be disastrous. Judy Garland became an occasional lover, even partaking in a threesome with Dean and actor John Carlyle. Now, I did a breakdown for Marilyn Monroe. Check those out if you guys are interested. Very good ones. Dean said, I don't really remember who did what to whom, Dean admitted. Judy gave us some pills after popping a few herself, end quote. Other conquests included sultry singer Eartha Kitt. I did a breakdown for her. She was the most exciting woman in the world to me. Eartha Kitt confessed, saying, our love for each other just happened. I became his confidant and I taught him about stage presence. We were like soul brothers and sisters. Eartha Kitt claimed she enjoyed a, situation with Dean and Newman, saying the romp ranks as one of the most celestial experiences of my life. Rock Hudson and Dean were lovers while filming Giant together in 1955 until Hudson dumped him. He seemed threatening, as if at any minute he could turn into a serial killer. He was a little nuts, maybe a lot nuts, Dean's friend, composer Leonard Roseman, said. He had a reputation for hitting on his girlfriends, like violent with them. Natalie Wood, his co-star and lover, while filming Rebel Without a Cause, revealed, sometimes Jimmy liked to hurt his partner and be hurt. He had a little fetish, if you guys catch my drift. I'm trying to be careful for you too, but James Dean is not making this easy. He's not making this easy. And she said she didn't like that. She wasn't into the violence type of stuff, so she wasn't too attracted to that. Dean routinely carried a flick knife and performed a scene at the actor's studio in New York where he took the knife and took it to his wrist, both his wrists, while on stage. Someone said he was actually committing the S word, trying to, take himself out in front of the entire class, recalled Shelley Winters. And according to Forbes, James Dean estate continues to bring in around $5 million annually. Though he had no children or no wife for his money to go to, it went to his family, right? It was announced on November 6, 2019 that a CGI version of Dean would be featured in a cinematic adaptation of the Gareth Crocker novel Finding Jack, set during the Vietnam War. A lot of people don't agree with that, and it came with a lot of skepticism. I don't agree with that. If someone's dead, let them be dead. Like, that's weird and creepy. Comment below what you guys think about that. A fun fact about him, it is reported that his favorite food towards the end of his short life was a brick oven pizza at Villa Capri outside of Hollywood, which no longer exists if you wanted to try it. His favorite drink was coffee, and his favorite ice cream flavor was coffee and raspberry. He loved Billie Holiday, and his favorite songs was When Your Lover Has Gone. And his favorite album, though, was Frank Sinatra's Song for Young Lovers. So with all those fun facts, let's get into his childhood, because I know the intro was a little whirlwind. Now we're going to get into his childhood and his untimely death, and his childhood is just tragic and sad, but I understand his love life a little bit more. Sometimes we hear all the crazy headlines with people, all these headlines, where does it originate from? What was his life like? And his childhood really gives us insight into that. So he was born James Byron Dean, and he was Mildred Marie Wilson and Winton Dean's first and only child, born on February 8th, 1931 in Marion, Indiana. He went on to say that his father was from a line of original settlers that could be traced back to the Mayflower, and that his mother was part Native American. James Dean lost both of his front teeth as a kid due to an accident involving trapeze in a family farm. He lived the rest of his life with false teeth, which he frequently removed in public to show off and discuss. He often claimed he lost the real ones in a motorcycle accident. Dean and his family relocated to Santa Monica, California, 6 years after his father left farming to become a dental technician. He initially attended Brentwood Public School, located in Los Angeles, Brentwood's neighborhood, but later moved his enrollment to McKinley Elementary School. Dean was reportedly very close to his mother during those years. the family lived there. She was the only person capable of understanding him. Mildred used to enjoy fulfilling her son's wishes while she was still living, and on a piece of paper she would give him to write down his dreams, his hopes, his wishes, and then he tucked them under his pillow. And at night she would take it and see what he wrote and make sure she did everything possible to make sure that it would come true. Dean's mother put him through violin lessons, and he also enjoyed banging on bongos. When he was 3, his mother enrolled him in tap dance classes, and later in life, he studied ballet. When Dean was 9 years old, unfortunately, his mother passed away following a brief battle with cervical cancer. Dean was sent back to Indiana to live with his aunt and uncle since his father could not bear the responsibility of raising him. So he felt very abandoned by his father, and you can only imagine, right? The death of his mother had a profound effect on him. It's like you lose 2 parents. You lose your mom and your dad is still alive and sends you away, right? Back when he was in 4th grade, he suddenly started crying at school because he missed her so much, and he would often have these kind of emotional breakdowns and outbursts in school. But I can imagine. And according to James Dean's friends, he was prone to mood swings. One friend stated he'd be up 1 minute, down the next. A mutual friend also shared that Dean felt uneasy in his own skin. Concerns have been raised about Dean's actions. He was notorious for dropping in on friends unexpectedly or calling them late at night. This final bit is understandable given his history of insomnia. Due to Dean's upbringing by his aunt and uncle on their Quaker farm, he and his father grew apart, as we can imagine.
Jimmy's mother died when he was 9 years old.
His mother plays a crucial role in the family from the beginning, whilst his father is the very personification of prude authority. After moving to Los Angeles, his mother took closer control over his upbringing. She introduced her only child systematically to the worlds of art and literature. He is wrenched out of the symbiotic relationship with his mother when he suddenly discovers that she has terminal cancer, seeing his mother agonizingly wasting away and eventually dying.
My mom and dad raised him from age 9 until he left here. To me, he was just like an older brother.
He's coming from a quiet place, but he's still a very angry young man because he lost his mother when he didn't want to.
The death of his mother was not the only trauma. His father sent him away to relatives in Indiana. James Dean could not come to terms with this second separation. For a time, he is looked after by the Winslow family in Fairmount. This, together with his desperate attempts to gain fatherly love, became the template for his later rebelliousness.
Mrs. Winslow, would you tell us why Jimmy came to live with you?
Well, his mother died. We learned that his mother would not recover. We asked for him. We were happy to have him, and he seemed to be perfectly satisfied.
He was always hungry, but he was just a nice kid.
He had been an enormous baby, but for some reason he grew up to be a very little boy. And because he was little, he tried all the harder, smashed the pole vault record for Grant County, and quit. Uncle Marcus said,
Jimmy broke 15 pair of eyeglasses just trying to be an athlete.
He thought sleep was a waste of time, and if he slept, he might miss something.
Dean, then a young boy of 11, found himself a little confused and without much guidance, direction. So he was looking for a father figure, and he went and met and became friends with the local Methodist pastor, Reverend James Deward. Ugh, I hate that. Deward appears to have had a significant impact on Dean's life, especially on Dean's interest in bullfighting, auto racing, and the theater. Dean had a romantic relationship with his pastor beginning his senior year of high school and lasting for many years, as stated by Billy J. Harbin. It was reported in 2011 that Dean had told Elizabeth Taylor, which I did a breakdown for her, also check that out if you're interested, that he had been the victim of sensual, at the hands of a minister around the time of his mother's death. So he said it wasn't a romantic relationship. He took advantage of me. It has been suggested in other accounts of Dean's life that he was taken advantage by Deward when he was a child or a young adult. And that started with the whole, giving him gifts, how it be, right? Which created a life for Dean where he felt if he ever needed anything in life from anyone of power, whether men or women, he knew what to exchange in return for that. This happens to a lot of women, but I see it. A lot of documentaries I watch, even here on YouTube, I read the comments. A lot of men were making excuses for James Dean. And I'm talking about straight men, not just gay men. Like, oh, you said people are saying he slept his way to the top, his childhood. It was is this man, but when it happened to women, this happens to women all the time. They get taken advantage of when they're really young, and they grow up to exchange their bodies a lot of time for favors or learn how to manipulate with their bodies because that's what they were taught from a very young age. But men don't make excuses for that. They don't make excuses for that. That was interesting to me. Comment your thoughts on that. Dean excelled academically despite all the chaos that was happening in his life and was well liked by teachers and classmates alike. He participated in the Indiana High School Forensic Association. He was a member of the varsity baseball and basketball teams and studied drama. And in the high school debate team his senior year, Dean was notorious for making up evidence. Being the cool kid, he just shrugged it off when he got caught one time. And in May of 1949, he graduated from Fairmont High School and returned to California to be with his father and stepmother. And when he told his dad he wanted to pursue, acting, he did not accept him. Just a lot of rejection. It was really sad. Dean decided to pursue a pre-law degree at Santa Monica College after he changed his major to drama and spent a semester at the University of California, UCLA. He became estranged from his father. His pledge to the Sigma Nu fraternity went unfulfilled because he was never initiated. Dean was selected from among 350 other actors at UCLA to play Malcolm in Macbeth. He also started acting at around this time, studying in James Whitmore's class. He left UCLA in the first month of 1951 to focus on acting. Dean made his television debut in a commercial for Pepsi Cola. He dropped out of school to pursue acting full-time and landed his first speaking role as John the Apostle in Hill No. 1 on Easter TV special about the resurrection of Jesus. While Dean was working as a parking lot attendant at CBS Studio and trying to break into the Hollywood acting scene, he met Rogers Brackett, the radio director for an advertising agency, who provided him with a place to stay and offered him professional assistance in the chosen field. Dean credits Brackett with being the catalyst that led to him getting his first major role, the lead in a Broadway production of See the Jaguar. Some point to Dean's involvement with Roger Brackett as evidence of his gay for pay. William Bast referred to Dean as Brackett's kept boy and once found a grotesque depiction of a lizard with the head of Brackett in a sketchbook belonging to Dean. And other conspiracy theories, I know I go down a rabbit hole. They said that lizard, the whole lizard people, the whole alien thing. Comment below your thoughts. Brackett was quoted saying about their relationship, "My primary interest in Jimmy was as an actor. His talent was so obvious. Secondarily, I loved him, and Jimmy loved me. If it was a father-son relationship, it definitely also was somewhat incestuous." Ew. You took advantage of this young boy too. Just sad. Dean made an appearance on the Brackett-produced series Alias Jane Doe in July of 1951. Dean moved to New York City in October 1951 at the suggestion of his mentor, Roger Brackett, and with the support of actor James Whitmore. He was still having financial difficulties when he got to New York, so he started getting free meals at Jerry's Pub on 54th Street and 6th Avenue. The owner, Jerry Lucci, had a great time chatting with Dean and often let him dine in the kitchen. He gained admission to the actor's studio to study method acting with Lee Strasberg after guest starring on an episode of the CBS series The Web, Studio One, and Lux Video Theater. From there, Dean's career took off and he continued to appear in shows like Kraft Television Theater, Robert Montgomery Presents, The United States Steel Hour, Danger, and General Electric Theater throughout the early 1950s. Now, as far as his relationships go, the Dean family has stated that William Bass, a screenwriter, was one of Dean's closest friends. During the last 5 years of Dean's life, Bass claims to have been his roommate at UCLA and later in New York. It wasn't until 2006 that Bass, Dean's first biographer, admitted that he and Dean had a sensual relationship. Bass was more forthcoming in his book Surviving James Dean about his relationship with Dean, describing how they had been lovers one night at a hotel in Borrego Springs. Bass detailed the challenging circumstances of their involvement in his book, and Dean's relationships with the young Italian actress Pier Angeli stands out in his fans' memories. But many people thought this relationship was just a setup because she ended up getting engaged behind his back when he went on a trip, and they were still together when she went and got engaged and literally married 1 month later after that. And a lot of people that were close to James Dean already came out and said, hey, it wasn't real. James Dean didn't really like women that much. He wasn't the most he didn't have the best luck with women, so they didn't think it was real. And then also the studios were fabricating a lot of his relationships early on to try to conceal that he had, tryst with men, because during those very conservative times, it was just not being a gay man. You weren't going to get too far. So the studios would set him up with other women and stuff like that, just to kind of get the girlies to not be completely turned off to him. It was early in 1955 when Dean began racing cars, and he finished second in his first race. While filming Giant in Palm Springs, he drove a white Porsche Super Speedster, which he later exchanged for a Porsche 550 Spider, unfortunately the car that would take his life. Dean was driving the Porsche 550 Spider when he was involved in an accident September 30th, 1955 at the location where Highway 41 and 46 currently met. His Porsche flew 50 feet into the air, somersaulted, and crashed into a telephone pole. He died with a broken neck. His forehead and chest caved in, yet Porter insists Dean didn't have a death wish. He had too much to live for. Every studio was offering him scripts, and he was becoming Hollywood's biggest leading man, end quote. In a bizarre twist of fate, James Dean was given a speeding citation for traveling 10 miles over the limit just 2 hours before the fatal crash.
I received the call at 5:59 p.m. It was a sideswipe head-on collision.
These are official police photos.
There were 2 persons injured. The dead was James Byron Dean, DOA, or dead on arrival at the hospital.
He made several jokes saying that he would not live to see past 30, and this is why you gotta be very careful what you speak over your life. Even his co-stars, Rebel Without a Cause, joked that they fully anticipated him to be in an accident that would take his life anytime soon. That's why you gotta be careful what you let people speak over your life, and you gotta rebuke people, okay? But maybe they knew something. Maybe it was a contract that he signed, who knows, whatever. But it's like everybody kind of anticipated that, and it just sucks. Terrifying details about the car he was driving when he died had emerged since his passing. Auto designer and worker George Barris brought the car following the terrible crash. Barris claims that upon arrival at his business, the vehicle rolled off a trailer and crushed the legs of one of his employees. A robber broke into Barris' store and tried to steal the steering wheel, but he didn't get too far because he fell and the fall damaged his arm. Some dedicated motorists even purchased some parts of the car, like they took the car apart and was selling some parts, and some people would take it to install in their own cars. Several accidents have been connected to those parts. Dr. McHenry was driving a car that crashed into a tree. The automobile was carrying parts of the Spider. As the Spider was on temporary display, another unexplainable thing happened. It just caught on fire. There have been numerous claims made by dealers and auction companies that they own parts of Dean's car, but the vehicle itself seems to have vanished into thin air. A vehicle museum put out $1 million reward a few years ago for the return of the car, but nobody ever came forward with it. And everybody who had parts, the car would just be, leave these celebrity cars alone. That happened with James Manfield. I did a breakdown for her also with her car. She died in a tragic car crash also. And that car turned out to be cursed. I don't know what it is with these celebrities. I just would like to add this final tidbit, is that it just seems like Hollywood preys on very vulnerable people. A lot of people that make it, it's very rare to see someone get into Hollywood, aside from nepotism, of course, which is rampant in today's Hollywood. But it's very rare to see like just a well-to-do, grounded person just get into Hollywood and stay. Usually they get in and they leave. Like, look at Yasmin Ghauri. A lot of celebrities that I did, they eventually this is just not for me moral-wise. But the ones that tend to want fame so desperately and make a name for themselves and become big are usually young, wounded children that did not get attention at home, that was abandoned, that wasn't loved, or parents that want to live through their kids, would force their kids into that lifestyle where you have the stage mom. I've just been noticing the pattern. Have you guys been noticing that? And James Dean was just another one who just really suffered at the hands of his dad. I think broke his heart first. He came from a loving home with his mother, and then you lose 2 parents at the same time, and then you get remarried to this new mother, and then I move in with you in my old age. Of course, they're going to be estranged, but now his estate is to this same family. Now, no one profited off the death of James Dean more than the studios. He became a legend like Marilyn after death. His fandom is like a literal cult. They even make trips to his place of death yearly, and it has been compared to Mecca, the Mecca trip. You guys are going to hear this from the mouths of these people themselves. I know it sounds crazy, but this is not Karine's own ideas. He also changed culture, according to goodfight.org. This is a direct quote from Stuart Stern, a scriptwriter for Rebel Without a Cause. So the man who wrote Rebel Without a Cause said, "They wore what he wore. They walked as he walked. They played the parts they saw him play. They searched for answers they thought he was searching for. Some found a kinship they had never known before." End quote. Suddenly, teenagers underwent transformations of mind-blowing proportions. An emulation of his movies, jeans, t-shirts, leather jackets, hairstyles, and fast cars all became the popular trend of the day. Wendell Rice, author of The Unabridged James Dean, surmises, and I quote, "Within a year after his death, James Dean had arisen Christ-like to become the biggest movie star in America, perhaps the world. Time magazine said he was the biggest news Hollywood has made," end quote. The renegade Dean was considered the epitome of power. Even up until present day, it is commonly accepted that Dean has done more for the sale of jeans than anyone in history. More than 45 years after his death, James Dean is alive and well on Hollywood Boulevard, where his plastered image hovers over nearly every street corner.
Essentially, the culture of the 50s arose from the war and the Depression. We materially had everything we could conceivably want: 2 cars, washing machines, and people began to think, what is the sort of meaning of life? And at the same time, you had the bomb threat. Why teenagers thought adults have completely fucked up. Might as well, have this sort of end of the world party. Hence, rock and roll, the beatniks, Kerouac, James Dean. He is composed of a little bit of a juvenile delinquent, a little bit of the sensitive lost kid, and he fused all these American types together.
Even today, which is really amazing, people will say about a new young actor, maybe he's the next James Dean. And they've been saying that for 50 years. I don't think many people know that he was only in Hollywood 16 months. And did 3 major films. Being frozen as a 24-year-old is just an amazing phenomenon that nobody's ever repeated that or been this popular this long after he's been dead. When they had the funeral for him was on exactly the same day that they released Rebel Without a Cause. Probably increased his popularity 1,000-fold.
All the ingredients are set for a legend to be born. Captured in the brilliant bloom of youth, James Dean becomes a worldwide phenomenon, and there is a surprising abundance of photos for such a short career.
Because he wanted many pictures, because it's conceivable he knew he would die young and he wanted to leave a legend.
52 years later, this small town in Indiana still celebrates its own Hollywood rebel. Every September, tens of thousands of fans and admirers flock to the James Dean Festival.
He liked to draw. He liked to paint. I've seen paintings and drawings he's done. He's very, very artistic.
Certain people can identify with him in a lot of different ways because he was so multifaceted. The Indiana farm boy, the wholesome high school athlete and student, New York City bohemian, race car driver. He painted, he played bongos. So I think he's just so multifaceted that people could identify with him in a lot of different ways.
A lot of Deaners have told me that they don't feel complete till they make the trip to Shalom, California, where he was killed. And it's very important in the Deaners' civil religion, but you have to go to Shalom too. It's no different than people pilgrimage to Mecca.
There was 4 girls that I remember reading about that they committed suicide within a week after Jimmy died.
That this isn't Jesus Christ, okay, but it has the same symbolism. After all, the crucifix picture is huge among the Deaners.
There's money invested in the Jimmy Dean image. And there are very good marketing people who keep pushing it, coming out with new dolls. To me, that's a major part of the equation. It's commercial.
$7.50. There you go. Enjoy it. Thank you. Nice. T-shirts are popular, of course. Books are always popular. They're gone. You're never going to be close to them. I guess it's a spiritual, metaphysical communication or closeness.
Youth mourned itself in the passing of James Dean. Because he died young and belonged to no one, every girl could feel that he belonged to her alone.
Dean knew he was swaying the youth worldwide and disturbing the family bond within on-screen messages. Dean knew the influential power these films had over the world, stating, and I quote, But after a while, I started learning what so many actors have learned about what that certain communicative power we have that so few people are privileged to have. We find that we can reach not only the people with whom we work on the sound stages here in Hollywood, but people all over the world, end quote. His co-star Julie Harris said of him, and I quote, "You see, he was mercurial, unpredictable, always putting you on," which I didn't mind because he was very beguiling. He did manipulate people and he knew he was doing it, end quote. Kazan reported his manipulations as so influential that women in the audience began to scream as soon as Dean appeared on the screen. They found the movie spellbinding and, according to various reports, went crazy. Rebel Without a Cause is by far the most popular and subversive of the Dean films. In Rebel, Dean is a misunderstood and subordinate youth who wins over the viewer with a raw sense of sensitivity and individualistic rebellion. The message that rebellion is acceptable against the traditional and outdated authority figures in society is all too obvious. Rebel scriptwriter Stuart Stern acknowledges his attempt to weaken the respectability of authority figures, saying, I quote, "Much of the writing and directing of the parents in Rebel Without a Cause was exaggerated and heavily biased. The poetic truth of the relationships among the young people was constantly being undermined by the way the parents were made to behave," end quote. Dean's movies were his sermons. He knew they were getting through to his fans. Gilmore says of Dean's intent of acting, and I quote, "His whole being was put into motion by his involvement on stage. There his energies worked for him, and it felt good to command attention and experience power in a sense of manipulation. The whole place could be in my hand," Jimmy said, "and my personal control, everyone out there, the people and the others on stage with me. It's like I was the sun in a universe. I could be giving life to all of it," end quote. He really saw himself as a god. He deified himself. Dean's brand of manipulation, personal control, promoted alcohol and introduced the unheard of marijuana as early as 1953's Showing of Glory in a Flower. So he made it cool. I mean, the term cool was used to describe him and popularized teens drinking and, smoking pot. In it, Dean, the token rebellious youth, lives a lifestyle of substance use and alcohol while screaming out authority. "I'm not going to take orders from you," end quote. Always looking cool, this was cutting-edge glamour for the youth of 1953. Parents was insidiously accomplished. Alan Richins of LA Law emphatically proclaims, and I quote, "I wanted to be an actor when I was in the 7th grade and saw Rebel Without a Cause. There was this guy, James Dean, yelling at his father, and I thought, that's great. I thought that was absolutely stunning because I had a lot of anger towards my father and no way to express it," end quote. Teen crime rates started to increase after the death of James Dean. Teen substance use started to increase as well, and it kind of paved the way into when you have like the 60s, the 70s, all that came with it. James Dean is by far the biggest influence of the rebellious teenager that want to go against the grain of what their parents say and get into substance, whatever. And however you may feel about it from that generation, it popularized the troubled teen. You wouldn't have shows like Euphoria if it wasn't for Rebel Without a Cause, right? You wouldn't have these teen shows like Degrassi and so many other teen shows you can think of where there's like a troubled, rebellious youth in it if it wasn't for movies like Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean. And even the movie Grease with Sandy and all of that. You can think Rebel Without a Cause where even the style, the way they wore their jackets, the way they did their hair, it was all to emulate James Dean. And Grease was one of the biggest movies of all time in Hollywood, right? In 1951, the Daily Variety made these sobering remarks about one of Dean's powerfully riveting performances. And I quote, "That film is mightier than books or Bibles in penetrating the consciousness of Christian people," end quote. Now, speaking of how Christ-like his influence in Hollywood was, what did James Dean actually believe? What were his spiritual leanings? Well, this is where it gets kind of dark. James Dean was raised as a Quaker after moving to Fairmont, Indiana to live with his aunt and uncle following his mother's death. He attended Quaker meetings in Back Creek and was later buried in a Quaker cemetery. Quakers believe that all people are capable of directly experiencing the divine nature of the universe, which is known by many names, God or the Holy Spirit, or simply Spirit being among the most common. According to Good Fight Again, Dean's aunt told of how, even as a young man, he had contact with spirit entities. She said that he would have conversations with a tree, and when questioned if the tree talked back, this is what she said, and I quote, "He wasn't talking to the tree or the roots," he said, laughing. I said, "Well, who are you talking to?" He just looked at me with a clean face and said, "My mother," end quote. James D. Word, a personal friend of Dean's, said, and I quote, "He said he believed the ghost of his dead mother came to him," end quote. Dean actively sought out spirits and spirit guides to help forge his path to success. Beulah Roth, another personal friend, recalls a time when Dean wanted to get in touch with a dead actress named Sarah Bernhardt. Roth said, and I quote, "There was a hotel in Venice, California, where Sarah Bernhardt had stayed when she came here to perform. He, Jimmy, was thrilled. He said, 'Let's go to the hotel.' So we go in, and it's a Fleabag hotel, a transient hotel, and no one there had heard of Sarah Bernhardt except for one old guy who said, 'Oh yeah, I remember that French actress.' And we said, 'Do you remember the room?' And he said, 'Yeah, I'll take you up there.' He took us up to this really horrible room. I guess in its day was elegant, and Jimmy said, 'You go out of the room. I want to be here alone. I want Sarah Bernhardt to come to me.' And he said he lay on the bed where she had slept, and he really felt that he had made contact with Sarah Bernhardt," end quote. And he even said he had an occult knowledge of a destiny to fulfill. Dean was also likewise convinced when asked about his assured confidence as a future movie star. Dean knowingly uttered, and I quote, "A spirit name. I gotta be faithful to her. It's predestined that I'm going to make it, and that I'm going to make it like Marlon did, and I'm going to be a star," end quote. So there was a female spirit that would come to him and tell him that he was going to be famous. He had this destiny, and he always said he didn't want to talk about it to people because, he would sound crazy, but he wanted to be bigger than everyone else. I'm going to show you guys clips of him kind of explaining that and getting into it. But Dean's desire to obtain superstar status increased his ever-growing search into spirits and the occult for success and empowerment. Dean sought out Eartha Kitt, which I did a video for already. Check that out, it's very interesting, whom he referred to as a devil because of her supernatural abilities as a performer. John Gilmore tells of Dean's desire to tap into these esoteric powers. He sensed moments in Eartha's performances when it seemed to him that everything she knew was fused directly into the moment, even things having nothing to do with her performing. He thought, translated directly into one energy force, a magic connection. He says, Jimmy was convinced that Eartha had special powers and knowledge she could deliver to him by some kind of osmosis, end quote. And he acknowledged these powers as voodoo trips, end quote. So in my Eartha Kitt video, we go more in depth about her voodoo trips and her supernatural powers that she was known for in the industry, and how and why she befriended all of these people. Dean's quest to make it to the top landed him a part in Elia Kazan's East of Eden. Due to Kazan's mogul image as a premier director of the day, Gilmore reflects, and I quote, "There was no young, serious actor at that time who wouldn't have sold his soul to Satan to star in an Elia Kazan film," end quote. Dean had also publicly stated, and I quote, "I have a fairly adequate knowledge of satanic forces," end quote. Dean did cavort with the popular Satanist filmmaker of his day. Gilmore recalls, and I quote, "Samson's house was a museum of pirated movie relics and antique set decorations, and he usually held an open house, a kind of revolving party. Kenneth Anger's film, Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome, had been filmed in the house. Anais Nin and experimental filmmaker Curtis Harrington playing parts, and Jimmy was eager to meet and talk to Samson. He knew about Harrington's experimental films. We talked about Fragment of Seeking. Jimmy was hoping to meet Harrington as well," end quote. Dean boastfully told Hedda Hopper, and I quote, "I had studied the Golden Bow and the Desaad," end quote. Barney Hoskins, author of James Dean's Shooting Star, says, and I quote, "There is something a little mad, a little possessed about James Dean. Each of his 3 major films conjures up a self-absorbed, hobgoblin kind of intensity. Close friend and twice co-star Dennis Hopper reflects, and I quote, "He was totally transformed when the camera began to roll. He suddenly was the character. Strange things were coming out of him," end quote. Dean's instructions to Hopper for achieving these spirit world performances was simply to leave yourself open. This was because Dean believed that another entity would inhabit him when he was acting. He described it as a sort of two people in the same skin, telescoping back from the other. The person inside would seem to drift up to the surface of the skin, end quote. Eartha Kitt, Dean's guru, acknowledges, and I quote, he gave out electronic waves. Who could tune into those waves? That's what his impact was, and many more tuned in on it than we can imagine, end quote. Dean was aware that he had the power to manipulate and change his viewers because as an actor, he had access to the very center of their being. As Betty Davis says, and I quote, the real actor, like an artist, has a direct line to the collective heart, end quote. When it comes to Eartha Kitt, she also had an ability to hug people and know when they would die. She claimed the Sunday before Dean passed, she hugged him and his soul was not there, so she knew he was going to pass.
My town's big in the sense of idolatry. My town believes in God and his crew. My town hates the Catholic and the Jew. Have you ever had that feeling that it's not in your hands? I mean, do you ever just know you've got something to do and have no control over it? I don't want to be just a good actor. I don't even want to be just the best. I want to grow and grow and grow so tall nobody can reach me. To me, the only success, the only greatness for a man is in immortality.
Jimmy Dean's legacy continues. The only other performers who, in death, have become larger than life are Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe. His posters still decorate the bedroom walls of many young girls. Guys, consciously or unconsciously, emulate Dean's detached insolence.
How did Dean attain the larger-than-life ability on screen? Dean was not a stranger to the occult, and his friends and acquaintances have spoken of how he would seek out the spirits of the dead to harness their power. Dean himself admitted, I have a fairly adequate knowledge of satanic forces. Dean became empowered as an actor through the occult. Close friend and co-star Dennis Hopper reflected on Dean's acting. He was totally transformed when the camera began to roll. He suddenly was the character. Strange things were coming out of him. Dean's instructions to Hopper for achieving success with his performances was simply to leave yourself open to the spirits. Dean actually believed that an entity would inhabit him.
And it said extra, and the extra said Robert Francis was killed in a plane crash. And Jimmy said, that's the second one. They happen in threes. I'm next. People that were closest to Jimmy, almost all of them nearly died immediately afterward. Their lives I had like 2 or 3 serious accidents, weird, strange, unnatural.
And it was a few days later that one of the girls in the chorus came to my dressing room and she said, Jamie's dead. He was gone the Sunday before when I had hugged him. And he wasn't there.
In 1964, almost 10 years after Dean's death, 2 teenage girls sadly took their own lives. In their note that they left to their parents, they wrote, and I quote, this was the anniversary of the day Jimmy died, and that their lives were now too unbearable to live without him, end quote. Altogether, an untold number of people taking their own lives have been committed in his name. When he spoke about God, Dean said, and I quote, there was no God. There was only art, only the composer, the creator of the symphony, end quote. He stole the fear of God from people's hearts not only through his movies, but also through statements such as this, and I quote, no matter what they say, there isn't any heaven, there's no hell either, end quote. He ragged Christianity as those destructive influences of beliefs based on torture and blood and crucifixion, end quote. Instead, he radiated the philosophies of Satanism and toto, proclaiming, I believe in freedom, not God. Now, one of the most scandalous things of Hollywood that people don't talk about is there is a death clause, and it existed for a very long time. Many people might notice it in the rap world or, the black music scene, like when Tupac died, how his records went through the roof. Same with Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson, which I did a video for as well. But this was very popular because of someone like James Dean, as well as like Marilyn Monroe. Studios realize that when someone dies, they become so much more popular and make so much more money that they start to release films right after they died. It's insane, actually. If you see my Jean Harlow video, you saw how when she died, they did not hesitate, especially when you die young, to put out the last film she was working on. The Jean Harlow video is really, really good as well. So I'll put the Eartha Kitt and the Jean Harlow video in the end cards for you guys to check out if you haven't seen, because wow, it was really good as well. But much like James Dean, they profited off of her death. Well, the whole economy profited off of her. Like the history behind her is wild. But James Dean, it was very similar, where now Hollywood had this clause where it was like, okay, his movie came out the same day as his funeral. Is that not strange? Is that not strange? And then not only that, they started selling everything, and they allowed this myth to be created around him to just make everyone be so interested in him and this craze. They would publish these crazy stories to make fans go even crazier, even people taking their own lives, the crazy things that people would do. So, it could stir up popularity, drum up popularity to make more sales. Everything that was attached to James Dean started to be sold out. So he was a hot commodity. So the death clause in Hollywood is that, hey, you come in hot like a flood, and then we take you out really early, and you live in infamy. And for someone like James Dean, who is initiated into the occult, and many of these stars are initiated into the occult, one of their biggest beliefs is that to live in immortality is the highest form of fame that you can achieve. So for them, living in immortality is greater than living here, getting old, losing all your teeth, decaying, all of that. You stay frozen young forever, and especially if you die tragically, you are living in immortality. You're immortal in people's minds. And James Dean spoke about his immortality a lot, and he almost predicted his death. Not only did Hollywood plan it, but James Dean was on board with his planned death because he always spoke about how he wanted to be immortal, and he wanted to be so famous that no one could reach him, no one could be as famous as him. And is that not true right now? So did he sell it for a price?
I don't want to be just a good actor. I don't even want to be just the best. I want to grow and grow and grow so tall nobody can reach me. To me, the only success, the only greatness for a man is an immortality.
And where this come from is the conspiracy history. His death was planned because he kept prophesying it. Dean had a surmounting attraction to death and dying. Gilmore relates Dean's fetish with the macabre, stating, and I quote, he talked about being hanged, about suffocation, and was trying to imagine being guillotined. Jimmy's talk of death, dying, and dismemberment wasn't as exciting or interesting to me as it was to him. It was never morose, though, and at times tended to become almost ecstatic. The image of his mother's coffin was indelibly etched in his mind. The idea of dwelling in caskets in general obsessed him, end quote. And he had pictures of himself in a casket. So those stuff fascinated him, and he would go through the different ways that he could die. Like, imagine the different ways that he could die.
People say racing is dangerous, but I'll take my chances on the track any day than on a highway.
Jimmy, we probably have a great many young people watching our show tonight, and for their benefit, I'd like your opinion about fast driving on the highway. Do you think it's a good idea?
I used to fly around quite a bit, took a lot of unnecessary chances on the highways. Now I drive on the highways, I'm extra cautious, because no one knows what they're doing. Half the time, you don't know what this guy's going to do with that one.
Do you have any special advice for the young people who drive?
Take it easy driving. The life you might save might be mine.
Dean is referred to as the prophecy commercial. There's prophecy pictures where Dean is in the picture window of the funeral home, and he's sitting up in a coffin. A picture of James Dean and his cousin, Marcus Winslow Jr., when he was like 9 years old, pointing to a tombstone that says Dean on it. Well, you could see it coming, it was a prophecy, that kind of stuff.
This was the overnight star who was the envy of everyone in Hollywood. As a result of his occultism, Dean was plagued by demonic entities. Gilmore relates one such occasion, his own friends, is not Crean's words, by the way, okay, saying, and I quote, he wanted to stay at my place that night because he said he felt haunted. It was like a voice was talking to him at the back of his neck, end quote. Dean called this haunting his Black Mariah. Once, when seeing a picture of a deathly grotesque skull, he recognized his Mariah and showed remarkable familiarity, saying, and I quote, that's him, the old expletive, the one who's been riding my butt. Look at the expletive, I'm not going to curse. He's got nothing in his eye sockets, end quote. Although occult powers granted his success, he still was miserable and depressed. Friend Beverly Wills explained, and I quote, "These low moods became so violent that he began to tell me that he was having strange nightmares in which he dreamt he was dying. I soon learned that it was nothing for Jimmy to run through a whole alphabet of emotions in one evening. His moods of happiness were by now far outweighed by his moods of deep despair," end quote. When asked why he was so fascinated with death, he replied, and I quote, "That's the only way I have any peace," end quote. And also, he was so young and he wasn't even famous that long. But as we know, it's rarely any accident in Hollywood, especially during those days, how people became famous. Because even their origin stories were fabricated. As you guys have seen on this channel, we break that down. Especially in the 40s and 50s, these people's stories were fabricated. Look at Merle Oberon. Well, the day that this is being posted is her birthday, where she lied about her mom. She lied about her sister actually being her mom, right? So yeah, things like that were happening. Their stories, their origins, their backgrounds were all fabricated. So you really don't know what to trust. So no one became famous by accident. People were groomed into it. And unfortunately for James Dean, this was just a sad story of the contract, the deal, the death clause. You don't go out unscathed, right? Comment below your thoughts. What do you guys think about that? And who else would you guys like to see a video from? I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in. I will see you in the next one.